We are live. Welcome, everybody. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Give me just a second. Make sure all my settings are good. Perfect. All right. Okay. Happy Wednesday. Thank you guys. If you're new to the channel, welcome. I am Chris with Monsters Under Our Bed. We cover true crime, mystery to the missing. We're going to be kind of recapping the last 2 days of the Richard Allen trial. Obviously, it was just jury selection, but there was a few little bombshells of stuff we haven't heard before that was used in the opening statements on both sides. So we'll kind of go over that as well. Obviously not a lot of people can go there because it's obviously there's not a lot of seats. But we know the murder sheet, they get there super early. And so they've been doing they've been doing shows talking about what it's like inside the courtroom. And we did that for day one on day two because they put out their episode, I think, at night or the next day. I guess it just kind of depends when they finish up. But so we haven't heard about what happened in day two as far as what was inside the courtroom. And I thought it was kind of interesting to share some of that. So I took a little bit of their podcast. But if you want to hear the whole thing, definitely go check out their full podcast. But before we get started, though, this is interesting. This was posted while I was putting my show together. I find this really good news. So this is coming from Bob Siegel. Obviously, he's been out there reporting. Judge Gull has ruled on a request from WTHR and other media to release trial exhibits. She will allow some pre-trial exhibits to be released in Fort Wayne next Tuesday, and exhibits introduced during the trial will be available at the end of each day. So a little bit of transparency, which is great. I'd still prefer a camera or some audio source, but at least that's something. I was kind of wondering how that would go. So at least we have that. I wonder... So this is an interesting request from WTHR and other media. Oh, that's kind of clumped in together. So I wonder with exhibits, I wonder if that also means like video or audio, like, let's say like his alleged confessions. Are those exhibits? When you think exhibits, you think of like a diagram, So let me know what you think in the chat. Do you think they'll release like the audios that they play? Of course, like the full 43 seconds, a bridge guy. Of course, that's something I've always wanted to see and dissect. So, yeah. I mean, because, when you think, at least for me, when I hear exhibits, I think of, just like a bulletin, with, just a typical, kind of like a timeline or whatever, or a picture or whatever. But this is interesting. Maybe I should type up exhibits and see what the definition, see if... And then there's a part 2 to it. So I guess there's a double-edged sword in this. So here's part 2 of his statement. The judge's ruling states media will get only 15 minutes each day to inspect the exhibits. Disappointing, but better than nothing, making the pretrial exhibits available at a site 2 hours away from Delphi in the middle of the trial. Not great, but better than nothing. So, if I understand this, is that they can get to see these exhibits before they're shown? So, pre-trial exhibits for that day. They get 15 minutes to study them. And then at the end of the day, she'll release it. Is that what I understand? Oh, did someone say some exhibits? Let's see. Let me pull up the other one again. Oh, yeah. Yeah, I caught that. Yeah. She will allow some pre-trial exhibits. Now that makes sense. Obviously, they're not going to release, the crime scene photos. That I totally understand that. But that's great. I mean, at least to me, I mean, as far as Judge Gull goes, I haven't been afraid to say, I'm not uh, a big fan of hers, but yeah, Scott says, what exhibits will there be? I mean, assuming that's got to be audio recordings, right? That's exhibits nowadays, right? Um, yeah, I mean, it's got to be kind of media um, type exhibits. No, yeah, of course they're not going to be crime scene photos. I think that's why some pretrial exhibits. So interesting, but again, I at the very least that's a win because right now we'll hear later on with what Murder Sheet says. They say it's been kind of a nightmare because if you get up and leave, you can't come back in. So some of these reporters, um, when they have like the 10-minute break or whatever, the very few that they've had, they'll go out, to go report, but then they can't come back in. So, um, yeah, it's been kind of strict. But I think they're doing something with media passes and stuff like that to fix that. As a matter of fact, there is an order here. I'm not going to read this all, but it has to do with the media and getting press passes and stuff like that. So I'm assuming to be able to, I don't know, maybe come and go. Um, we'll have to see how it goes, obviously, come Friday. But anyway, I thought that's kind of interesting. I just saw that just before I went live, and I thought, oh, that's awesome. At least there's something. Exhibits from Delphi will be shown in Fort Wayne. That's quite a drive away from Carroll County. Yeah, that's true, huh? Yeah, why are they doing that? That is weird. That's going to be a pain in the ass for the media because they're going to have like two different, you know, um, sources going, to Fort Wayne to get the exhibits. Yeah, that's going to be interesting seeing how that all plays out. But all right, let's get into it. Sandra says cell phone data. Yeah. Yeah, it'll be interesting in cell phone data. I'm not too excited to see. I mean, I'm excited to see anything, of course, but the cell phone data, for those that know that area out there is spotty. So I think that's why they've always had trouble just in the investigation period. We've had people go out there and they do, the iPhone thing, find my iPhone, and they'll bring out two iPhones. And when they look at where they're at, and then they look at find my iPhone, and they have the phone in their hand, it'll sometimes show that they're like, a baseball field away, or I mean, a football field away, 100 yards, whatever. And they just kind of bounce all over the place because it's not because there's only supposedly two towers or whatever. So I'm just going to play a quick 2-minute recap for anybody that's not familiar with this case, and then I've got four main things that we're going to go over. We'll go over the animal hair, or not the animal, but the hair, the interruption. I also made a timeline. If anybody wants to know why, like I said, I have a hard time looking at any other suspect than Richard Allen, because to me, when you put a timeline together, like like a visual, and you put all the moving pieces together, and you have Richard Allen originally saying 1:30 to 3:30, and you put that in, and you put it in with everybody else's moving parts, everything lines up. But I'm going to show you what it looks like if Richard Allen showed up from noon to 1:30, like he said the second time. And I'll show you how that plays out, which is kind of interesting. All right, let me do this. And then, of course, we'll talk about how it's been going on inside the courtroom. Of course, we'll recap yesterday because obviously we didn't get to do that yesterday because, again, Murder Sheet puts out their podcast much later. So here's just a quick recap for anybody that's not familiar with the case, and then we'll get going and I can get to chat for a minute here. German had made last-minute plans to teenage girls. Abby Williams and Liberty German had made last-minute plans to go to the Monon High Bridge, which was supposed to be a teenage hangout with a historic trail and a really high old abandoned bridge. The two girls, who were best friends, just had a sleepover the night before and were excited when Libby's sister, Kelsey German, said she would drop them off as long as the two girls found a ride home, which they did. Although it was February, the temperature was nice for that day, and even though it was a Monday, they had school off that day. The two girls, Abby and Libby, would be dropped off just before 2 p.m., where they planned on only staying for a couple of hours. The two teens, Abby and Libby, would begin walking the 501 trail to the Monon High Bridge. As the two would approach the bridge, Libby, who had her iPhone, would take two pictures, one as they passed the first platform, and another which shows Abby looking down as she is crossing the scary, tall, gap-filled railroad tie. The girls didn't know it yet, but they were not alone. As a few hours would go by, the father of Libby, Derek German, would show up, but the two girls were not at the meetup spot. Thinking that the two teens just lost track of time, he would end up calling Libby's phone. The phone was ringing, but no one was answering. He would begin searching for the two teens, but when running into other people, no one had seen them. Eventually, the authorities would be called out, and this would lead to a search party looking for the two girls. But sadly, there was no sign of them on that first night of the 13th. With the search being called off late that night for safety reasons, it would be resumed early that next day. They brought in helicopters, divers, and many other resources to scour the area. But just around noon that day, they would soon discover a grisly scene. Authorities would discover the two girls across the river, and both had sadly been murdered.
Investigators solemnly identified the two bodies found in Carroll County as 13-year-olds Libby German and Abby Williams.
We would soon get multiple press conferences, including one of the most memorable statements by Superintendent Doug Carter. Okay. Melissa, thank you so much. Hitting that 12-month anniversary. That's so awesome. Love you to the moon and back. Thank you. Likewise. I appreciate your support. You are a legend. The chat here. I wish I could shout out everybody, but we'd be here all night. Tom, good to see you. Amazing supporter. There's so many unanswered questions. Oh, yeah. When it comes to this case, I think the exhibits are groups of circumstantial evidence provided by the state. Yeah, I just looked that up. So since you brought that up, might as well just show this. So according to this, exhibits in court are physical evidence or documents that are presented as proof in legal proceeding. And as we can see here, examples. Exhibits can include emails, digital photos, text messages, social media posts, or data retrieved from electronic devices. So, there we go. So, yeah, that's awesome. Because I think even though the Murdoch trial was obviously televised, it did seem kind of like they, if I remember, like Court TV and some of the other major news outlets they would have that media, because I remember like the video that obviously was very damning towards Alex Murdoch, the one that his son had, which recorded and had his voice on it. I remember that they had like the actual version, and they were playing that like just after they had shown it in the court. So clearly they must have, just like this, they must have given it to him, before that day, or during that day, before the trial that day began. So that's great. I mean, again, I think that's a win. When it comes to goal, I think that's a huge win. I'm kind of speechless, to be honest, that she's going to allow that. So, I mean, the more transparency, the better, because, we know a lot of people are on both sides of the fence. Rose, don't you still work on the Sebastian case anymore? If there is something major that happens in that case, I will definitely cover it. But this is, with the Delphi case now starting, this is a case that I followed well before I became a YouTuber. And, we covered this a lot well before Sebastian case. And now with the trial finally happening, and this is a case where the trial kept getting pushed back. There'd be a trial set date, a trial set, and then, weeks before, there was something and it get pushed back. So, but yes, I am going to, of course, really focus on this, but if there is something major, Rose, I will definitely cover it. So, anyway, getting off track here. So of course, as most of you know, we would have 5 years where this case, I wouldn't say necessarily cold. They were definitely working angles. We had Ron Logan in the beginning, and we had Keegan Kline. And then eventually, somebody that just out of nowhere, a Richard Allen popped up, and he would be arrested shortly after they did this search in the Wabash River, which was kind of, the timing was very interesting. So, let me find the timestamp here. So we'll recap what's been going on, the highlights of the last 2 days, and I found some interesting stuff to go along with it. And then also, I built this because I just wanted to show what it looked like if Alan did arrive there at noon and left at 1:30, and just kind of show you guys what that would look like. Let's see here, 1:14. Okay. Grandma Shirley just came in. I got unsubbed for some reason. That happens. I don't know why. It's so weird. But I thank you for so much for resubbing and being a member. I really appreciate it. Yeah, it's weird. YouTube does the funkiest things. Heather Whatever, now hitting 6 months, getting the big 6 for Truth and Justice. Thank you for carrying. Thank you so much, Heather. God bless you. We got Brian in here, gifted a Mob Crew membership. Looks like Peach Cobbler got gifted the membership. Thank you so much, Brian, for the support and gifting membership.
I mean, if you're not shackled, maybe you're more comfortable. Maybe that's more.
Yes.
Okay, so one of the things from, I think this was day 1, if I recall, and I think they might have even talked about it, but just recap, obviously they would have a group of jurors, potential jurors, and they would give like a mini opening statement. Just, a small example of what would be the bigger opening statements that come Friday. And what was interesting is that they mentioned that during when the killer took the girls, at some point the killer was interrupted. And that's very interesting because we've never heard that before.
When the hearing, should I go and start with the...
Let's start with the hearing. Well, yeah, I mean, I guess
round only had 4.
Yeah, it was a tiny round in the end, but 5 rounds in total. And there was, you mentioned the lack of lunch break. To keep it, the public and the media and the families and the attorneys, this was a long day for everybody, but it was also a very long day for those 2 groups of 52 everyday Allen County citizens. There was one, I think, 10-minute break at 11 a.m.
Yeah.
Does that sound?
To talk with them, they would have a half an hour.
A bullet and the brutal murder of 2 girls.
Did he say it was about Richard Allen, or did he say it was about Bridge Guy?
I thought it said Richard Allen, but I wrote down Richard Allen. If you wrote down Bridge...
He said the people in Delphi tend to enjoy these trails, to go and enjoy nature. He talked about there was this Monon Bridge 60 feet above Deer Creek that the kids like crossing.
To prove their bravery. And that girl, that day, the girls, crossed the bridge.
And he said they weren't alone.
Yeah, they were not alone.
They were followed by Bridge Guy, who had a gun and forced them down the hill. Intent to... how did he phrase it?
He said, I have the quote as, quote, he used this gun to force them down the hill, and his intent was to have his way with them.
And that's another thing. We've never heard have his way with him. Obviously, we've kind of heard that, there's likely the motive, which I think didn't surprise too many people, which was obviously S.A. I don't think that's too much of a surprise. But then he also is going to mention that he got interrupted. And again, that's something we've never heard of. And I can only think of one person who would be able to announce that, in my opinion. And that must be, just in my opinion, I think that's coming from one of the confessions from Richard Allen.
Which I tend to think is...
indicative of
a delicate way of talking about a sexual assault?
Yes. He talks about how there was an interruption.
Yeah.
And that then the bridge guy used the gun to force the girls to cross Deer Creek, and remove their clothes. And then abruptly he said, quote, and then he cut their throats, end quote.
So, yeah, the theory, thought the quote was in here. Might have cut the quote out. But obviously the other thing they mentioned is that he was interrupted. Now, when I heard that, and then I saw Barbara McDonald talk about it, she posted a tweet here, kind of giving her theory on it. I believe the theory is that during the crime, a resident across the street got home from work at 3:30, and the killer may have thought the resident could see or hear or got spooked. So, and that kind of made sense in a way, that he got interrupted at 3:30, because I believe that was Brad Weber. But we'll talk about a different scenario, because I was checking Reddit today and yesterday, and there was a big discussion about the interruption thing, and something that people mentioned, and it didn't even cross my mind about thinking about it that way, and I'll talk about it here in a second. But here's Bitter Beat Poet, somebody who clearly was like a local and had spoken to some of the witnesses, including like the juvenile witnesses. He clearly had a connection with a lot of people that were involved. I don't know how much information he got, but everything that, I wouldn't say everything, but the stuff that I've seen that he posted, look, 5 years ago, he posted stuff that obviously came true. But yeah, Brad came home from work, and he obviously took the private driveway that goes under the bridge, and I'll show you where that is, where compared to the crime scene. So, I mean, that would make sense if that was the interruption. But then there was some talk on Reddit about another scenario, which we'll talk about here in just a second. Jazz says, I still think someone else is involved with this. It's certainly plausible. It always felt like there was kind of another entity that maybe brought those girls out there, and then, it was like one that brought them out there or lured them out there, and then the killer came. That's always kind of what it felt like. But what we're looking at right about, kind of in this area here, just approximately above these words, is where kind of sadly the crime scene was. But as it pans over, we'll see the bridge and you'll see the private driveway. And keep in mind, this is what it would have looked like, obviously, during the time of the double homicide. And so we can see the bridge, and then keep in mind the crime scene's kind of, a little bit over here. And if a car were to be coming over this way, I mean, clearly you would hear it. And, with it being fall, or not fall, but early spring with the leaves, like in the trees as they are, you would definitely be able to see that car. So that would be kind of, just an example of, if a car was coming down that private driveway, which goes to the Weber's home. So that kind of made sense with people, with Barbara mentioning that. But then on Reddit, they were thinking that it actually pertained to the murder itself. Sorry, I'm trying to... Did I put it at the end? Or did I put it back over here? Oh, here it is. Oh, it was right after. Okay. All right. My apologies. I always add more on to my timeline and stuff, and it takes me a lot of time to reorganize and get it all in order here. But yeah, it's right after this here. So on Reddit, people were talking about that the interruption was actually related to the them having to cross the creek, which is interesting. Because that is something that always has been kind of a curious situation, is why would the killer cross this? Anybody knows that river, especially during that time, is freezing. It's ice water that's going through that river, or creek. I'm sorry, it's not really a small river, but creek. So was the interruption actually this part here? And maybe there was something. Oops, I smacked my mic. Maybe there was something like, because we know other people were there. It's just terrible that this killer was able to do this, and just nobody see it, because there was people walking around before and after the entire time. So I wonder, is that the interruption? Maybe he heard somebody, by the bridge or whatever, and kind of got freaked out and decided we're going to cross over. Let me know what you think in the chat. I know, there's always been theories that the girls may have tried to, potentially run, and he caught back up to him. Hey, Unknown Secrets, good to see you. I hope you're doing well. Let's see here. And somebody think it was some kind of cult. That was the defense's theory, but they can't use that officially. They'll still bring it up in court, but the cult theory I think was a little too much. But anyway, the whole point is who would know? That's something. Again, the interruption is something that's never been mentioned before. So to me, I think that clearly has to have come from one of the confessions. Who else would know that there was an interruption except for the three people that were down there? And of course, there's only one to tell the story. Who else would know that there was an interruption? So clearly, that's got to be in one of the confessions. So just makes me wonder how much, 61 confessions, how much details that only the killer would know that possibly Richard Allen has revealed that will be damning. Be interesting to see. Jacqueline says, very unlikely for one person to act to get for more than one person to act together in shared as fantasy. Yeah, the Hillside Stranglers. What was the other one that with the van? I want to say Toolbox. Is it the Toolbox Killers, or is that just Killer singular? God, there's so many. But yeah, remember there was two of them. They had a pretty long stint. Thank God they finally got caught, but they did some absolutely terrible things. Obviously, back then, they didn't have like DNA and the kind of stuff that they can do now. Sharon says, I think one of the girls maybe could have run away, but they chose to stay together. Yeah, that's always been my theory. Because for those that are familiar with that area, there's two hills that they have to go down. Once they're past the bridge, and he says down the hill, these hills are steep. I mean, there's kind of like a little trail, obviously, that people have used, and it kind of like almost parallels the bridge, so you're almost like next to it, and it's almost like you're going back, but obviously you're going down. But if you go down any other way, the embankment is steep. I mean, I think Barbara McDonald said that she slid down on her bum going down the hill. So it kind of gives you an idea. So it's always kind of been theorized that maybe when they were going down the hill, maybe he tripped and they said, let's go for it. Let's cross the hill, or cross the creek. Maybe that was the interruption. I don't know. But yeah. Or was it Libby? Was Libby the interruption? If Richard Allen is guilty, we know that Richard Allen, in July when he was there and Libby's family was there, he was giving them, the family, these really bad, odd looks that made him feel uncomfortable. And then, of course, one of the confessions, he says that he feels, what was the term? He felt bad for Abby, but he didn't. have any regrets for Libby, which sounds like there's something with Libby that she probably put. Obviously, she's the bigger girl. She was athletic. She was a swimmer. She played baseball. Same height. So I bet she probably tried to take him on, sadly.
But he said, bridge guy.
And unfortunately, it didn't work out. Then, of course, the hair. Let's skip over to the hair here. Who was one of the two victims in this case. Sasha says, I believe Ellen was involved, but I find it hard to believe with all these connections. No one else is there. Yeah, it always felt like that. And then, of course, them mentioning, other actors and then tentacles. Tentacles, I could see just, that's just kind of more broad, but actors is kind of more, general. But yeah, so let's listen to this clip here talking about the hair, and then let's see what people think. Maybe we'll do a poll here in just a second about what kind of hair this could be. Had hair found in her hand. This is very interesting because this was actually noted by a reporter way back in the very beginning, but they had taken that detail off. And the big shocker is, it is not a match to Richard Allen.
60 times. But during the defense presentation to the jury pool this morning, we learned new details. Not only did Allen claim that he murdered other details that don't exist, he also confessed to killing his family and grandchildren, which clearly never happened. Also, we found that investigators have discovered hair, presumably from the killer, clutched in Abby's hand at the murder scene, but that hair did not come from Richard Allen. His attorneys are trying to lay the groundwork of a false confession defense based on mental health and Allen's time awaiting trial in solitary confinement in a maximum security state prison.
There has been much debate on whether they had DNA in this case, and if so, what form was it in? And finally, that has been revealed. This actually lines up with the search warrant made for Ron Logan, which mentions hair fibers found at the crime scene.
It looked to investigators like the girls died without putting up a fight. Unknown fibers and hairs were collected from the scene. The search warrant authorized investigators to seize any guns or knives Logan had in his house, take a sample of his blood or bodily fluids, and his cell phone.
This is my backyard. My backyard just happens to be bigger than most people. How many people have a murder committed?
This will definitely be a benefit for the defense. It's something they can work with in the trial. But we know that the killer likely had a hat and or a cap on his head. And the alleged killer, Richard Allen, is usually seen with short hair. So one could argue that it wouldn't be a stretch to think that Allen wouldn't have likely left any hair behind. But the question still remains, whose hair is it? It would be crazy to think if the killer did bring some random hair with them to place near the victims to throw the investigation off. Also, keep in mind, I mean, that would be really, really smart, just to throw them off. But, the question still remains, is it human or animal? And that's what we're going to talk about here in just a second. That has been said in that same search warrant for Ron Logan that there was no sign of a struggle by the two victims. So why would there be a hair in the victim's hand if they did not put up a fight? To me, it's certainly plausible that this was planted there on purpose, but that is just my opinion in theory. So there's some shots of Richard Allen. Obviously, I think he would have had, I think it's interesting, all the shots you see before obviously he was arrested. He had the beard much shorter, and then he kind of grew it out longer at some point. But there was rumors that pet hair was taken from Kagan Klein's dog. There was rumors, I believe with Ron Logan, there was pet hair taken from the animals. And then the big one is Richard Allen, and the cat. And this one's a big one, so we'll talk about that. Again, these are rumors at the time
that we saw. That's in the middle, and then you have Richard Allen on the right.
But this is a clip from Court TV. And this lady comes on and she drops some interesting information.
And I look at that, Dr. Carol Lieberman, and I see a match.
Yes. You know, if I were in this family, I would be so incredibly frustrated. I don't know what else they need. You know, they have the pictures, the sketches, they have the photograph, they have the voice.
Yeah.
I mean, with forensics these days, the photograph and the voice can be really linked to him. He admits that he was wearing those clothes. He admits that he was there. His car was there. You know, in fact, they also found cat hairs on the girls, and they dug up his cat, and they matched. So what else?
So she dropped some pretty big bombshells. Now, again, it hasn't been reported by, a prosecution. It wasn't in the PCA. So obviously you have to take that with a grain of salt right now. But it has been mentioned many times. I still have to be careful with saying it's fact, but I would say it's pretty much a confirmed rumor to be true that they dug something up in Richard Allen's backyard. I mean, there was multiple media reports on that. And what else would you really be digging up, because I doubt if they come and they're doing a search warrant for your house, and let's say besides a pet animal, if you had like the weapons and stuff that was used in the crime, would you admit to that being in the backyard? Oh yeah, my kill kit and everything's right here. So I would think they were probably asking them, like, have you buried any pets recently, or have you buried any pets? That would just be, one plausibility. So in my opinion, I'm gonna pull you guys. Just give me 1 second here, guys. Not sure. Okay, got to pull just to see what you got. What kind of hair do you think was in Abby's hand? Now, some people have said that it's like literally just a strand of hair. It's not like a clump of hair. It's just like what Jacqueline said earlier, like a secondary transfer type deal. Which obviously, we've learned through detectives that secondary transfer, we're always, if we're interacting with people, we're sharing each other's DNA or fibers if we're interacting physically, or, if we're close enough. Secondary transfer happens all the time. Bama, Chris, you should watch Dr. John Mathis. God, that name sounds familiar. Profile podcast. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. Is he kind of like a profiler? Profilers, yeah, I really do enjoy. That'd be such a fascinating job. I mean, to be able to kind of get into the mind of, those kind of people, it's truly astounding. But again, this is where could the defense be saying, yeah, it doesn't relate to Allen, but they didn't say it's human or animal hair. So again, is that really just, something where you need the context to really fully understand everything?
Do you need? And then, of course, we have his little friends. And this was supposed to be one theory, and I think it makes a lot of sense, that this was a botched child sex kidnapping. He was supposed to kidnap the girls and bring them to Ronald Logan's house, and then the catfisher was supposed to join them, and they were going to have sex and have...
Yeah.
Oh, I think she's talking about the Ron Logan, going into the Ron Logan part of it. But, okay, so 145. Looking at my notes here. Okay, so we got the hair. Let's see what's going on in. Let's see. We got Animal at 38. We got 29. So Animal is a little bit ahead right now. Again, there was a lot of rumors with Kagan Klein and his dog. And the cat, I mean, that's been mentioned so many times, and at the very least, we know they dug something up. And I just can't imagine, if anyone wants to share in the chat, what else would they be digging up? They would have to know something's there. And to me, I could just see them asking, hey, have you buried any pets in the last 5 years or whatever? And, what's up, Sleuth? Good to see you. I hope you're doing well. Another guy that follows this case, does an amazing job. That's somebody I would say go check out his channel. Good to see you, buddy. Hope you're doing well. Can't believe it's finally happening, man. Holy cow. So this is the interesting thing before we move on to the next thing. So I remember I did some research with animal hair versus human hair. So this is the issue. When it comes to animal hair usually, like cats and dogs, they shed. And that hair doesn't necessarily, usually most of the time, doesn't have the root in it. So, because obviously animals shed all the time. And so if you were to find a clump of, animal hair that had been shedded, you couldn't really go and get a DNA profile because, unfortunately, it doesn't have the root. Whereas if, obviously with humans, usually a hair follicle will more than likely have a root. But if it doesn't have a root, they can do mitochondrial DNA and they can break it down and still get, some kind of profile from it. But what I understand is with animals, I think in some cases with I don't know if they can do it with the shedded hair. God, I'd have to look. God, I remember this has been almost a year ago when I researched this, but I remember it's a lot harder with animals when it comes to getting DNA because, again, you have to have the root. Pam Jan says that if the hair isn't RA, it's going to be a problem in my opinion. So one other thing, think about the Long Island serial killer. They found a ton of hair with a bunch of victims. Most of them wasn't his hair. And if I just told you that, and if you weren't privy to that case, you'd think, and that was the DNA, huge DNA that helped them solve this case, but it wasn't his hair. It was actually his wife. And that just goes to secondary transfer. A lot of hair that they found with Long Island serial killer victims was actually his wife's hair, but his wife was out of town. So if anybody that's not familiar, his wife wasn't involved in the murders. His wife was usually out of town, and that's why he would go and then, take another victim. So keep that in mind, that secondary transfer happens all the time. And again, we don't know if it's animal or human. It was kind of interesting that he left that part out. Okay, let's move on to what was it like in the courtroom from yesterday, because obviously yesterday we covered a little bit what was going on day one. We're going to cover both attorneys. How are they doing? With the jurors, how are they connecting? So at the end of day two, remember they said they had 17 jurors, which was odd because, you need 12 and then 4 alternates. That's 16. So the reason they had 17 is because apparently one of them, but they haven't mentioned, actually one of them is going to be booted. So really they have 16. So it was kind of interesting that they, reported on 17, but word is that that's just because they're getting rid of one of the other ones that was going to be on the jury. Squiggly says if they found a hair in her hand, no big deal. Could have come from anywhere, including any of the girls.
It didn't really seem well organized in that sense.
Yes.
If they found a big clump, if they found a huge clump of hair in their hand, that's a whole different story. Yeah, because you would think, we've heard, if they were defending themselves and they pulled the suspects or the killer, whatever's, grabbed a clump of hair while defending themselves. Obviously, that makes sense. But it'll be interesting to see what happens.
With that said, I want to mention Richard Allen came into the courtroom today, I think a little bit before 9.
Yeah. He was unshackled swiftly. He was wearing a mint green button-down shirt and glasses that sat atop his head. I never saw him actually use those glasses.
He never used the glasses. So all day, these glasses like on his forehead/head. I'm sure you've seen people.
Yeah, I know what you mean.
Yeah.
It's hard to describe this, but
and then there was an odd moment with him where for an extended time he looked as if he was in prayer. Obviously I don't know if he was praying, but
so this is day 2. So remember, when I went live yesterday, we played what it was like for day 1, and so this is from the murder sheet given what was actually going inside the courtroom. So these are just some highlights. I broke it down to about 15 minutes, just some different things going on in the courtroom. And of course, I like the murder sheet. They're giving credit to the defense. They're giving, they're being unbiased.
He had his head bowed and his hands folded together.
Yeah, what did you make of that?
I don't know.
Rose, it officially starts Friday.
What did you make of it?
I don't know. I guess it depends on what you're looking at. I mean, unclear if praying or just resting in a strange way, but certainly something that seemed to mimic the gesture, I suppose.
Yeah, what do you think, guys? What do you guys think about the glasses? I don't have a regular pair of glasses. I'm gonna ruin my hair, but it's like he's maybe doing this. Well, this looks like I just got sunglasses up, but if you had like regular glasses, like. Is that to kind of make him look more personable, and that's not a bad strategy, something tells me that's got to be something the defense, I was going to say librarian, but he's not wearing it, but just, I don't know, more just the average person, that's got his reading glasses. But yeah, it's
gesture
interesting.
Is commonly associated with prayer in Christianity, right? Like that's what prayer looks like to people who are Christians, and so it was as if he was in prayer.
Yes.
9 strikes the previous day, and the defense had used 7 strikes. We described earlier strikes are when
I was on a jury trial 50 years ago,
where Andrew Baldwin, one of the defense attorneys, brought up something he was at. I mean, I don't really understand all the legal stuff around this, Kevin, so you're going to have to help me out. But what it boiled down to was Baldwin brought something up, and there was a conflict between him, Nicholas McClelland, the prosecutor, and Judge Francis Gull, the presiding
Baldwin was saying,
judge in this case.
Nick McClelland is telling people that beyond a reasonable doubt.
So it looks like there was another kind of skirmish, but just kind of a squabble between the attorneys. Obviously, this happened on day one as well, where prosecution was kind of accusing the defense, Baldwin, really, that he was kind of asking the jurors, do you think he's guilty or not? Kind of not playing fair.
It just means you have to be firmly convinced. And Baldwin said, well, you need more than that. And McClelland said, well, firmly convinced is, that's what it says in the definition.
In Indiana, yeah.
In Indiana. And he said, and I had to object when Baldwin was doing the stuff earlier, because yesterday he was trying to condition the jury because he was asking how they would vote in this case, or trying to indirectly ask how they would vote.
We didn't really talk about that in our previous episode, and maybe I kind of missed it. But what is conditioning a jury? What was he complaining about? Why is that a problem? Was Baldwin doing it? Because I praised Baldwin's performance yesterday.
Baldwin's style was great, but yeah, you want to. It's a fine line.
Realize as a non-lawyer.
Andrew Baldwin's mini opening was maybe a bit stronger and a bit more dramatic than the one he did yesterday.
He improved. I feel like McClelland was sort of at the same level, which was a very high level. Baldwin.
So this is just a little highlight from Baldwin. It seems like out of the two, Baldwin has been really connecting with the jurors on the defense side. It seems like Rosie is not connecting as well. It's almost like a good cop, bad cop. I think they're saying Rosie will probably be a lot better when he's like cross-examining witnesses. That's probably going to be where his strong suit is at. It seems Baldwin is connecting with the jurors better. Same with Nicholas McClelland. He's, apparently he's kind of been making them laugh, so he's connecting. So that's great. You got both sides, got their strengths. And then you have Jennifer Auger. I hope I pronounced that right. That's also part of the defense team. I don't have a picture of her. Apparently, she was doing really well.
Yesterday was good.
Them.
Today, I think better.
Yeah, I would agree. So one of the details he mentioned that was not in his remarks yesterday, he was talking about the confessions that Richard Allen gave, and he was saying, there's details in these confessions that are not accurate. He says, for instance, Richard Allen says that I think I killed my family and my grandchildren. And, of course, Richard Allen did not kill his family and, as far as we know, does not have any grandchildren. And I think that was mentioned.
Yeah,
earlier.
That was not in what Deer, but like in a previous hearing a long time ago, right?
Right. And I thought at the time, and I could be wrong, this just could be my crazy off-the-wall interpretation, I interpret it as him speaking kind of symbolically. Like, I did something so terrible, it killed their reputations. And didn't just kill their reputations and their good name, it even goes down to my unborn grandchildren.
Wow.
That's how I interpreted it.
Okay.
Yeah, that kind of makes sense.
Am I crazy?
No, you're not crazy. That's an interpretation. I mean, I don't size was context. What is the context of the confessions? And I very much agree with that. I want to know what exactly was said and when. And I want to know, is he on recording saying these things? Or is this something where someone else is claiming he said them? And I think that's an important distinction.
Yeah, to me, I think that, out of all the evidence, I think the confessions are going to be the biggest thing. I mean, the bullet, I don't even think is a big deal. To me, the confessions, I mean, if you start talking about things that no one should know except for the killer, that's pretty damning. And when you got 61 of those that are supposed to be direct confessions, we know there's more than that. And those are probably the false ones. And we know, I don't know how many are recorded, but we know quite a bit, talking with his mother, phone calls, mother, wife. So, again, to me, it'll be interesting.
Because I think...
And when did the false confessions start? Are they mixed in? Or is it, kind of starts out, all of these are true and they relate to what actually happened, and at some point, then the false confession comes later and they're just kind of separate? Then to me, that just sounds like the defense team kind of came in, they kind of came up with a plan, start to act loony and start to make false confessions, and then, I think the timing of those between the real and the false is really going to be a big deal.
If he's saying them and he's saying them intermingled with other better confessions for the prosecution, then that might raise questions. Yeah. If it's a situation where he's consistently saying things that are at least accurate, verbally, and that's being recorded, and then other people are claiming he's saying kind of off the wall things, then I don't know. Those seem more like outliers, or maybe people are putting words in his mouth, or maybe people are misunderstanding what he's saying. So I guess I want to know context.
Baldwin wanted to emphasize the normalcy, for lack of a better word, of Alan's life prior to this. So he mentioned he had a wife of 30 years, he had a dog, he raised a daughter, and then he switched to talk about what prison is like. And I'm going to raise my voice here to try to mimic what Baldwin did.
All right.
Baldwin said, he endured terrible things. You're a child killer, baby killer.
Kill yourself.
Kill yourself.
Oh, trying to. I meant to edit that one out. I guess it's better than the S word, but yeah. So apparently that's what he was hearing from the prisoners, which doesn't surprise me. And people wonder, kind of complain that he was kept in this solitary area, which to me, if he was in Carroll County, who knows, what could have happened to him, in that kind of area where maybe they didn't have as much manpower and somebody could have gotten to him, and wanted to become famous and take his life. So, I don't know. To me, I think it's kind of, I don't know. I think it was better, but I think a lot of people disagree.
My first reaction to that is lawyers always phrase things very, very carefully. So he mentioned there was hair. He didn't say it was human hair. So is it animal hair?
Yeah, if it's animal hair, then it couldn't have been Richard Allen's.
And
so I find that interesting because we know that these murder sheet, they're very close. They have a lot of great sources. They've been pretty spot on with just about everything they put out. And yeah, I think that's interesting that they kind of talk about the animal. They don't outright say that it's animal, but it won't surprise me. It won't surprise me if that ends up being animal hair. But you can't blame the defense bringing that up in out of a context situation if that is. Especially that's going to make big headline, with the hair clutched in Abby's hand. So, I got two more things. I've got one where it shows how bad Gull has been doing. But if you missed earlier, let's just recap one thing real quick here. If you missed earlier, this is awesome. Judge Gull has ruled, and I think this came out today, that ruled on the request from WTHR and other media to release trial exhibits. She will allow some pre-trial exhibits to be released in Fort Wayne next Tuesday, and exhibits introduced during the trial will be available at the end of each day. So that is absolutely amazing, especially coming from Judge Gull, where it's just been no transparency at all. I think that's great. And we were looking up, what could be these exhibits. Examples of exhibits include emails, digital photos, text messages, social media posts, data retrieved from electronic devices, etc. So that's amazing. So it seems like each day that there's a trial, each day they will, before the trial starts that day, it seems like they can go to Fort Wayne, and they have 15 minutes to get the exhibits or whatever. And then if they don't have enough time to get everything or whatever, then at the end of the day, I guess then that it will be released. So I think that's great. I was really kind of worried about that. Because I was kind of worried. I'm like, especially, because there's going to be a lot of stuff. There's going to be, the confessions. There's going to be, obviously, the 43-second video. I'm sure there's going to be some emails, text messages, probably. And, I was kind of wondering, like, is that just all going to come at the end and people got to go do FOIA requests for it? So I'm really happy that they're doing that. Yep. So yeah, I'm explaining that right now. So that's great. Because an example I used earlier, Alex Murdaugh's trial, they kind of did the same thing. I remember when they had the infamous video where, obviously, probably one of the most damning pieces of evidence against Murdaugh was that video from his son where, it's at the chicken coop, and obviously we can hear his voice in the background. And I remember during that day that they were releasing that exhibit, like Court TV and some of the other major news outlets had the actual video. So it seems like that's they had probably retrieved that before, possibly earlier before the trial started that day. I'm assuming. I could be wrong, but something to that effect. Yeah, I think it's 9 to... I want to say 9 to 6. I'm not sure Saturdays, if they're doing like half days. It's supposed to be Monday through Saturday, so I don't know if Saturday is like a half day or if they're just going full steam on Saturdays as well. But yeah, I believe it's 9. Yeah, and please let me know if anybody does donate through PayPal or Venmo. It does help this stream. Yeah, just let one of my mods know. Can I shut you out? Because sometimes I don't get the updates until much later. So here is something that I wanted to do. If you ever wanted to see the timeline from Richard Allen, I think this is, to me, I think the 4 juvenile witnesses, I mean, I'm sure there's going to be a lot of big witnesses, but I think one in particular, but maybe all 4 of them are going to be big witnesses, in my opinion. But here, just take a look at this. This came from Bitter Beat Poet 5 years ago. 5 years ago. He's talking about one of these juveniles. The scarf is an important takeaway. Both witnesses I've spoken and mentioned it to, just how good of a look either got of him. That should be taken into consideration. With that said, the young lady, when shown a pic of a convicted S.O., Jimmy Duvall, said that his pic resembled who she saw. And she's not accusing Duvall, just saying there is a resemblance. I do believe law enforcement does make arrest, not only will BG be in his 40s to 50s and short. I wish I could zoom in right now. This is by the youngest one. Not only BG will be 40s, 50s, and short, but will resemble Jimmy Duvall. I swear, I cannot wait to hear from the Voorhees, the younger sister, because, it sounds like she was spot on. Gail, I heard someone somewhere today from a trusted source that the defense is going to have a private meeting with the prosecution there about new Odin evidence, and judge is supposed to say if they can use it. Really? Interesting. Very interesting. We know right now that they can still present that all the Odin stuff, the people that they'll bring in for that, but the jury cannot be there. Obviously, that's just to put on record, but that's interesting. I have not heard that. Okay, so here is what it would look like if we did Richard Allen's. He originally told Dan Dillon 1:30 to 3:30, which, in my opinion, it lines right up. If you really break it down, just to a basic perspective, they're almost just like on a track, right? Because there's just one, even though the trail kind of cuts off, there's just one path that they all go, except for the ones that are kind of cutting through the Mears parking lot. But really, you just have this one path, and you have all these entities, variables, which are witnesses in certain timelines, and we know that they have metadata that proves certain time frames that they're there. So for the juvenile witnesses, we know at 12:43 p.m. they take a picture of this bridge, right? Then 43 minutes later, they take a picture of a bench that's near the Freedom Bridge back at point A at 1:26. So that tells me that they probably spent around 17, maybe 15 minutes at the bridge. I just put 17 just to kind of round it up to 1 p.m. And then, because we know it's about 25 minutes from the Freedom Bridge to the bridge itself, the Mona Bridge. So, I just wanted to show you what it would look like if we put Allen in his noon to 1:30 time frame, and how there's some major issues. So all we have to do is just rewind what the girls and where they came from. So we can rewind it back to noon. So now we're just kind of reversing these 4 juveniles. And again, this is just approximate. This is not accurate, but we assume they got there around noon. Maybe they got there a little earlier, but they clearly came from the Freedom Bridge over this way. So, obviously, in the first Frank's motion, now when Allen's being, interviewed, he allegedly stated that he arrived there around noon, and he probably left the trail around 1:30. So let's just see how that looks. So we're assuming he parked at the CPS building. So let's put this on the track and see what happens. So that would mean these 4 juvenile witnesses would be there almost right behind him. Right? And when they get there, at 12:43, they snap a photo. Now we haven't. I don't think we've seen that photo. But they snap a photo of the bridge. But there's no mention of a guy standing on the bridge. So I don't know how that would fit in. I'm sure they would have noticed a guy standing on the bridge. But there's no mention of that. But and then I'm going to tell you if it was the other way around. It still doesn't work. So then he would probably leave just before them because remember, they're on a track because we know they're there at 12:43 and then they're going to be there at 1:26 at the Freedom Bridge. So basically they're just on a train track and everybody has just kind of got their little time frame window. And so you could say, well, he's slightly ahead, but they would be following, they'd almost be like on each other's hip, more or less. So 1:25, we know. So remember, he's saying that he's leaving at 1:30. We know that they're there taking a picture of this bench at 1:26. And that would be about the time he's allegedly leaving now. And then guess what? Guess who comes along at 1:30? We got Bridge Guy. I don't think Alan's ever said that he ran into Bridge Guy. So the noon to 1:30 doesn't work because unless he parked somewhere else, which if he parked at the cemetery, he would have likely been seen maybe walking there. But it doesn't work. And if you did the opposite, let's just say the girls were ahead of him. So let's just say the girls were walking faster than Alan before he got to the Freedom Bridge. It would be the same thing. They would both end up at the bridge. No matter who's in front of who, they're both going to end up at the bridge. And there's no mention of these girls. They would have ran into each other multiple times. But none of them said, yeah, there was a short guy in front of us or behind us. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. And if he's leaving at 1:30, he's going to run into Bridge Guy. So, again, like I said, that's when you put these timelines together, because you got to put them, in chronological order. And obviously you have timestamps of where certain individuals are at certain times. So you can kind of deduce, well, we know it takes about 25 minutes to walk from A to B. So it's pretty easy to put these people on the track and kind of know where they're going to be because that's the way they're saying they're going. So, again, it doesn't work. So, again, I just wanted to put that out there because the noon to 1:30 doesn't work. These girls are on the trail going back and forth. They would have seen him. So, I hate to kind of cut it like that, but that it's just the truth. These girls are there and would have ran into him multiple times probably. So anyway, I just wanted to throw that out there. But here is kind of what it's like in the courtroom with Judge Cole. I'm going to play this so I can read chat here for a minute.
Of, well, even if you think he probably did it, you got to vote to acquit, which is absolutely accurate.
Yeah.
And then at the end of that round...
I don't know if that sounds super convincing to the average juror, though.
Because this is something that would have been very basic to say, here's when the next hearing will be. We're not going to cover these motions today. We're covering them here. And here's why we picked 17 jurors. So what had to happen was a group of reporters
Yeah, there was a mini scrum.
descended on the attorneys to try to get information from them. And I can tell you the attorneys seemed uncomfortable with talking to the reporter. They are absolutely telling the truth.
How do you think Auger did today?
I thought she did good.
They were reacting in the way he was interacting with them.
Cleveland, I think they now have 17 of the 16. And then Gull has a private conference with the attorneys and then says, okay, we're recessed. And she disappears. So question number one is, are we just recessed for a little bit? Are we coming back? Because you said earlier there was going to be other motions that were going to be considered today. And if they're not being considered today, are they being considered tomorrow? Or are they being considered Thursday? And also, why the heck do we have 17 jurors instead of 16? Very, very confusing. And I think I've said in the past that I feel that this judge does not take seriously her role to provide public access to this. I think I've said I don't think she cares about that angle of it. I think it is getting to the point where I'm beginning to suspect that she actively wants to impede the flow of information. Because this is something that would have been very basic to say, this, well, here's when the next hearing will be. We're not going to cover these motions today. We're covering them here. And here's why we picked 17 jurors. So what had to happen was a group of reporters...
Yeah, there was a mini scrum.
...descended on the attorneys to try to get information from them. And I can tell you the attorneys seemed uncomfortable with talking to the reporters because they don't want to anger Judge Gull.
Also, it's not their jobs to do that, you know?
And I will say before I say anything else that my experience of Judge Gull's team is that they seem scared of her. And these attorneys, at least from the outside, seem scared of her and what she might do. And I would think generally it's fair to say that a good leader is not feared by his subordinates or her subordinates. She's respected by them.
Well, it's also just, you know, I mean, okay. Here's my take on Gull's views on the media. Just, I mean, again, we don't know what's in her heart or her head. I'm just what we're observing. I think this is somebody who has no patience anymore for this case in the sense I'm actually not talking about the legal process because frankly, I agree with you. I don't really feel like there's been anything super untoward there. I think the whole situation around removing Baldwin and Rosie was obviously incredibly problematic and the Supreme Court of Indiana ruled on that. But, you know, ultimately that's in the past and they sort of absolved her for everything around that. So looking at it since then, I don't think there's been a lot of things. You mentioned slow to do rulings. I agree with that. But, like, there's been nothing where I'm like, whoa, red flag. But around the media stuff, I just think there's been simmering resentment, perhaps, that I've sensed where it's like, I have to deal with all this. And to a certain extent, I'm trying to be sympathetic here. I can understand where you're like, all these people are camping out and focusing so much on this case.
You can't blame him. I mean, this case is crazy. You had to expect that, but it sounds like, of course, I put this together. Well, I would have put it together either way, just to kind of give an insight of what it felt like on day 2. But she said, like, yeah, the courtroom kind of feels like everybody's, you know, even the lawyers are kind of scared of Judge Gull, and you know, it's really tense. And then they talk about, you know, it should be, you know, if you're a leader, you should be respected, not feared, which I think is a great statement. Yeah, Sharon says, yeah, I totally agree. Judge Gull tried her best to have the cameras in the courtroom, and the moment she did, the defense created a circus. Yeah, I don't know what it was, but boy, she shut that down fast. And, you know, I'll be honest, I'm not a big fan of her. I think she's necessary, though. That's the thing. I think it's kind of a double-edged sword where I think she's necessary for this kind of case. The magnitude of it, I think they need somebody like Judge Gull, unfortunately. But yeah, again, at the same time, I'm all about transparency because this case has been just, with people that believe Richard Allen's innocent. They, obviously, I just hope everybody gets the answers that they're looking for. And obviously, I'd be much easier if there was transparency, so everybody could obviously come to their own conclusions and break down the evidence as is. But again, now we've heard that she's gonna release some of the exhibits before each day. That's awesome. That means I might be starting my live shows earlier. We'll have to see how Friday goes, but I just want to say a huge shout out to Stacy for the PayPal. It really helps. I spend hours putting these diagrams and videos together, so I do appreciate those that can support this channel with the memberships and the donations, because this is my job. I do try to go out and search for the missing, but when it comes to wintertime, I'm kind of shackled down, and so, but Brian gifted another Mob Crew membership. Thank you so much, Brian. I appreciate the support. And if you did get gifted, please thank the person that gifted you. Kathy says, thank you for all your hard work and continue to keep us informed. This case is another heartbreaking case. Yeah, each day we're going to go live and we're going to cover everything. We're not going to, even though I think Richard Allen is guilty as hell, we're still going to cover, if it's, defense comes out with something big, we're going to break it down. And, it's going to be full transparency on both sides. Obviously, with it being limited information flowing out, it's going to be kind of hard, but it'll be interesting to see what the exhibits, man. I think that's huge. Let's see if there's anything else that got released before we finish up. Looks like they're giving court passes out, and that's great. Because I heard that was kind of a mess. The press, because they're having issues. I said this earlier. They had very little breaks. I've kind of felt bad. They were grinding it through. I think it was almost on purpose. Like they just wanted to have Wednesday off, maybe. So they just kind of grinded it through for the 2 days just to get that over with. But there were reporters that obviously wanted to update on anything that was big, and there's some that went out to report on a break, not knowing that they couldn't come back in, and so, yeah. All right, so it don't look like there's anything as far as any more motions that I see. No, the defense witness is 120, Jacqueline, and the prosecution is 50. It's 170 altogether. Now, what I did a little research on that and found that a lot of times, so let's say Karen Reed, for instance, they had, I think, I forget the numbers, but it almost came like, so they'd have 50 witnesses and they ended up using 35. And that and then I looked up Alex Murdaugh and it was kind of the same thing. They had 60 or 80 and they ended up using only 60 of them or something like that. So I think that's just kind of an estimated number. So I'm assuming maybe 2/3 of that will actually be used, but who knows? Boy, 120, oof, that's a lot. You had the right number, but yeah, that they were all together. Yeah, 170 altogether. Better late than never, June. Fashionably late. Thank you so much for the $1.99 super chat. You are a legend. I appreciate the support. Again, we're going to be going live every day, and I'm just going to be nonstop putting information together. So I appreciate the support. Yeah. again, like I said, like I know Sleuth, I know you said you tried to put the Richard Allen the noon to 1:30. It doesn't work. When you have those 4 juvenile witnesses, and if again, I hate to just repeat myself, but if you really think about it and just break it down to just like a basic, simple concept, you could almost put this in like a 2D side-by-side format where you have it like trains going, and they all have their little time frames, and they can either go forward or backwards. And we know that there's certain time frames that are confirmed because there's photos taken, so we have metadata. So we know these girls are kind of like guards, and they're there going back and forth, and you just can't put Richard Allen there between noon and 1:30. It doesn't work. Those girls would have ran into him multiple times, and yeah, it just doesn't work. I don't think that. I think the defense. Well, no, I don't even know if he had the defense at that time or not, or the lawyers at the time. Anyway, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and then it's conveniently noon to 1:30, right? I mean, like you didn't say, "Oh no, I was there from like 10 to noon," or I was going to say after, but no, he wouldn't be after the murders, but just conveniently he's leaving as the killer is supposedly arriving. To me, that's just sloppy. Yeah, it's sloppy. Again, but it sounds like it's going to be a fair trial to me. It sounds like they agreed, because remember, the jurors that get picked, they have to be agreed upon by both sides. I've been a juror myself. Of course, it was just a 2-day thing, but yeah, obviously, the jurors that they picked are both agreed upon by both parties, and it sounded like some of them were asked directly, how do you feel? Are you guilty or not guilty? And one said guilty and one said not guilty. So it sounds like they definitely have a good medium. Are you going to go have time to look for Aidan Clune again? Yeah, I'm going to do a members live. I was going to do it today, but I may do it tomorrow. And we're going to talk about that because, yeah, they want to bring cadaver dogs out. And, there's been some issues with the roads and everything out there. Because one of them got washed out. Anyway, I don't want to get too sidetracked, but yeah, with Aidan Clune, there's 2 ways into this. And, you need a truck or an ATV to get in there. Something heavy lifted, and one of the roads, it's not a road, it's a dirt road, it's gone. It got washed out. So yeah, there's some issues, unfortunately, with that. Sasha says thinks the sticks were placed very specific. It's not normal. I think Sasha, of course, she would never want to see the crime scene photos. And I've never seen them. I've seen descriptions of them. And I've had somebody tell me exactly how it looks, and believe me, trust me, when you see the Court TV thing and you actually see the real thing, I'm telling you, it's so different. It's so different. And not even my creation is close. because they're branches and they also have limbs coming off of them. There is no like figure that comes apart. I would say maybe Abby, because there's only a few sticks. You could say that this thing here, but Libby, it again, it's not what you think. It's not concise. It's not, it's branches that got, it's not logs, but you know what I mean? Like, big sticks with branches coming off, and it's, yeah. But again, we'll see how that goes. No, Alan's residence? Newly discovered domestic? I've not heard of that, actually. Is that true, AJ? Huh. I'll have to look that up. That's interesting. All right, guys. Remember, they'll still bring the evidence in, but the jury won't be able to see it. So they'll still bring it in, but the issue is they can't put any of those guys there. I mean, the main guy, Brad, he's at work. He's clocked in. I don't know what a better alibi would be than you're at work clocked in when this murder's happening, and you're in another town far away. Well, not far away, but, hours or whatever. Patrick Westfall, that guy's a giant. Like, if that guy was walking through the trails, he's got Viking in him. You couldn't miss him. I can't see a bunch of guys going and doing this and not just make a mess and leave DNA and hair and tracks everywhere. I just can't see it. But that's just my opinion. But I do respect the other side as well. Anyway, all right, guys, I am going to head out, guys. I hope you guys have the rest of a good night. We'll be back tomorrow. I think same time. If there's not a lot, then maybe I'll do just members live. But yeah, we'll talk about the Aidan Clune stuff. And we'll cover everything that I've been covering, obviously, for the last couple months. So we'll definitely talk about it all. But again, I just, yeah, please. I would love to. Yeah, AJ, I would definitely. Does it have his voice on it? If it had his voice on it, I would have a filled day. Wait, now I just got to look this up. Is it? Don't. I can't spell. Richard. Yeah, I'll have to research it because I don't want to sit here and read a bunch of stuff. Yeah, if you could email me. Yeah. How in the hell have I never heard of that? Episode here. Oh, that's nothing. That's the Walmart worker. Heard that. Yeah, email it to me. Email is obviously in the chat and it's also in the description. But interesting. All right, guys. I will be breaking down more stuff tomorrow if there is anything worth talking about. And then Friday, I'll let mods know. I'm not sure exactly what time I'm going live. We'll have to see. That'll kind of gauge what we'll be doing for the rest of the trial. But, I'm kind of thinking it's starting to go like maybe 2 hours before, 2 or 1 hour before the trial ends that day. That way, just that I can kind of put everything that's been announced that morning and afternoon. I can put that all together and then start the show and then present that. And then when trial ends, I'm sure there'll be more stuff that comes out and then we can kind of put the rest of that together. So that's kind of the idea. And yeah. So that's what we're going to probably do. Thank you, Mitzi. Thank you, Jennifer. Thank you, Dee. Karen, I saw you in here earlier. Thank you. Appreciate all the mods. Eventually, we'll have to do a mod appreciation. And thank you to those that could donate. It really helps Tom, Heather, Brian, June, and Stacy. This is my job, and I spend hours and hours putting these things together. So God bless you guys. I just put something out for the Patreons. I put out an 8-hour video for them. So if you're another way to support this channel is Patreon. So if you want to check that out, that's for the Madeline Soto case. I put out all the interviews for Jennifer Soto. Plus, I fixed all the audio for that, the ones that had bad audio. So that took me 3 days to put together. So with that, we'll be back likely tomorrow. And if there's not a lot, we'll probably do a members live. So God bless you guys, and we'll do an outro, and we will see you guys tomorrow. Much love.